So we'll continue the conference in English, and we're moving to perspective 3, job retainment and creation in the oil and gas sector. And this part of the conference will be a debate. We'll have a discussion about how to attract a strong workforce to the oil and gas sector. And the participants are Martin Peter Nesby from Oil and Gas Denmark, Thomas Damkjær Petersen from the Danish Society of Engineers, IDA, and Thomas Søby, Danish Metal Workers Union. And I'd like to invite you to the stage, please. So, well, basically, I'd like to ask you all the same question in the beginning. What is the most significant hindrance for job retainment and creation in the oil and gas sector? Thomas Damkjær, what would you say?
I think the greatest thing to do now is that the oil and gas sector is not attractive for the young people, because the young people want a purpose with their job, and at the moment there's not a long future for the oil and gas sector. And then the oil and gas sector had to be more attractive, to say maybe you can make a job to be here for maybe 5 years and not say you had to stay here for 15 years. And I think it's a great challenge for the sector just at the moment.
Mm-hmm. So basically the sector is not seen as attractive for your young engineers that rather want to move in a green direction?
No. I think it's a challenge for the sector, and it's a challenge for me, because I think there's a future for the sector for the next 10, 20 years, and we had to get engineers to the sector to continue the great job they have done the last 20 years, and if you don't get good engineers in the sector, it will be not go so good in the sector.
Mm-hmm. So, Thomas Søby, I'm sure you share basically the vision of retaining and creating jobs within the sector, but what would you point to as the most significant hindrance for your members?
Well, I think, yeah, for my members, it's of course that the sector hasn't been very helpful in making space for trainees or for apprentices. Mm-hmm. I think quite a few young people, if they want to get into the sector, need to be sure that they have a room, a place for further education. And I think the sector has been some kind of reluctant in order to provide these spaces for young people. Mm-hmm. That's one important part, I think. And the second one is that the image or the perception of the sector isn't that good anymore. I think they have been somewhat invisible, kind of having this reputation of being a dirty industry, and I think they need to.
Well, it surely is dirty.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's dirty and it's black and it's all kind of stuff. But then again, it's also a highly technological industry. It's a place where you can actually make a career. It's pretty well paid. Mm-hmm. So they have a lot of things they could actually kind of promote in order to attract young people. Mm-hmm.
Another good thing is that it takes place classically in parts of Denmark where maybe you don't have that many jobs. So that's another good thing. So Martin Nesby, having heard those reflections, maybe a poor image and not seen as a sector where you can have a future for the next 30, 40 years. How are your reflections on those points?
I can add a lot to that, unfortunately. I think we have a triple challenge. The employees we are looking for, the engineers, for example, and the metal workers, already now we see a very low unemployment rate. So the resource is scarce already as it is. Secondly, as mentioned, young people do not have difficulties in seeing themselves in our industry, and even though we think there are great career opportunities, it's not very sexy to be part of the oil and gas industry. Mm-hmm. So obviously we have image issues here. And thirdly, we see that a number of people who will be retiring within the next few years. So we are challenged, and I cannot disagree with what has been said.
So what do you intend to do about it?
Sorry?
What do you intend to do about it?
Well, on the image side, for example, we have Universum perform an image analysis, and that confirms all the bad dreams we had, so to speak. We know, as we talked about, it's not considered a sexy industry. We also understand that even though we know it's a very innovative industry, it's not considered innovative. And I think we need to do something about that. And we've been talking about that for quite a while. But I don't think there's any low-hanging fruits, and the discourse in the society is very much about the green transition. So, in fact, today, when we talk about when you look at the magazine that we have issued, we talk about self-sufficiency until 2050. We now start talking into the societal agenda about the green transition, etc. So now I think that we need to be much stronger here. We have been, in our industry, we've been very good at talking with ourselves. I think we need to engage more with society and explain why is it that it's a position of strength for Denmark to be self-sufficient with oil and gas supply, and how could employees see themselves in this and make sure that we have Denmark up and running. And that it takes a lot, but we are there to do it, and we are going to work with that.
But is it still, after the crisis for the last couple of years, difficult to find a skilled labor force for the sector? Is that a real problem now?
I think, given the difficulties in the industry and the struggle to get the cost base down, a number of people have unfortunately been laid off, but that doesn't respond to the long-term structural challenges. So in a few years' time, and when activities start picking up, and when listening to Robert Nelly today, we heard about the booms and the bust, and I think he's right. And at some stage, the oil price will go up, activity levels will go up, and then there we are.
So, Thomas Damkjær, you told me earlier that young engineers are purpose-driven. What does that mean in this case?
I think it has a lot of things to do with the brand of the oil and gas sector, and I think it will be a very strong signal from the sector if they can say we will drive the change to the green industry in Denmark, and going together with other sectors in the energy sector, with the wind power and with other, well, there's a green image, and then I think it will be possible to some of the young people to say, I can start in the oil and gas sector, and then I can move forward to another sector because I can take the things with me I have learned in the oil and gas sector.
Okay, so they get the idea now that it's basically a dead end.
Yes, you had to say it has an end, and you had to say it yourself because young people like you when you said the truth, and we know it has an end.
Yeah,
we can discuss the end. Is it 20 years or is it 30 years? That's okay, but young people, they never look 20 years ago. They look maybe 5 years ahead, and not longer.
And so, talking about sex, wind and biofuel seems more sexy to engineers.
Yes, because you can save the world, and young people will have a purpose in their job to save the world, for not only for themselves but also for the future, for the planet.
So, does this go for metal workers as well, Tom Søby?
No, not exactly. I don't think so. I think that one of the problems of working offshore is kind of the working hours as well. It's more easy to tell the wife, and it's mostly men working offshore.
Yeah.
It's easier to tell the wife that I'll go to work this morning and I'll be back this afternoon.
To pick up the kids.
Yes, instead of telling her that I'll be leaving today, see you in 2 weeks' time, and then I'll stay home for 2 or 3 weeks. I think that the working hours is kind of troubling in order to have a family life in the same time, and I think that could be an obstacle in order to.
But are metal workers basically attracted to the core work of working offshore? I mean, or is there anything you can do there in order to attract more metal workers?
If we look at the workers offshore today, I think it's not a lie to say that they are an aging population. And I think it comes back to what I said just before. It's more easy for older people or people more mature to keep those kind of jobs. So, and I appreciate that that's not easy to solve that kind of problems in an industry like this. But I think something has to be done in order to kind of let people have a normal family life besides the job.
Okay. So, and then you spoke about an aging workforce, and so maybe we can move into that. You spoke about in the beginning trainees. Can you just develop a bit on the problem there?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, trainees is. I can tell those coming from abroad that we discuss trainees in many sectors. There's a tendency to carpenters and others say do not accept enough trainees, but that goes for this sector as well.
Absolutely. In my point of view, large parts of the Danish industry has been rather reluctant in order to kind of educate the future workforce, and I think it's kind of getting back to them, kicking them in the behind right now. And probably in the oil and gas industry, it's not a problem today, but it will definitely be a problem in 2, 3, 5, 10 years ahead of us. And if we can see the end in 30 years, and we have the problem in 10, that problem might just be accelerated and might even increase to a certain extent, but where it's probably pretty difficult to solve it.
Yeah. So Martin Nesby, what do you think about this issue with trainees working offshore? I know that it's difficult, but it's coming to get you if you don't solve it and get more youngsters into the field.
I knew you would pick it up.
I have to.
I think something we need to take very serious, and I think we need to do something about it. We are currently looking at the barriers in the industry, and I know this has been said before, but this time it's in a more collaborative manner in the industry. We are looking at what are the barriers in terms of safety, in terms of cost, transportation, number of beds on a platform, for example. And obviously the safety side, where we need to make sure that we have mature employees who know how to handle the oil and gas. We prefer to keep the oil and gas in the pipes. And so there is a number of issues that we need to deal with. And so it's not that the industry is simply rejecting. There are genuine barriers, but I also think that there are opportunities, and we're looking at it currently.
But Thomas, you've told me that you've heard this from the sector for a decade almost. So
yeah, that's pretty much it. And I fully appreciate there's difficulties about security. There's difficulties about the number of beds in the platforms. I fully understand that. But the sector has to do something by itself if it wants to create an opportunity to attract skilled workers in the future as well.
Okay, so let's move into that field. Solutions, what can be done? Tom Stabke, you said, well, it's really, when it comes to engineers, it's really technical, very interesting jobs. Yeah. And you'll have to convince people to move into the sector. But what would you point to that could make the sector more interesting, more top of mind with the young engineers?
As I told you before, I think it's very necessary for the sector to pinpoint that they will be a part of the green change in Denmark's energy sector, and you have to make yourself a better brand for the young people. And maybe you had to go to the social media with small movies, go to YouTube, go to Facebook, and make some movies about what are you doing to connect the job you are making as in the oil and gas sector. You can change to the future for Denmark's welfare society. I think that's to connect this branch and sector together with something who's in the mind of the young people is very, very necessary, because there's a lot of other sectors with young people also can be hired to, and you are in very, very strong competition with other sectors at the moment, and we have a lack of more than around 13,500 candidates in engineering and science in 2025. So you had to come up in front and not laying back, because if you will survive this the next 3 to 5 years, you had to come up to the 10 best workplaces in Denmark and say, if you will come here for the next 3 to 5 years, and I think the young people, if they hear it and they can see it can be difficult with the work hours and going away from home for 14 days and coming home again. But I think the young people is more, okay, I will try it. And then they can see I get a lot of experience as I can use in my future jobs. Yeah. And I think it will be possible if you can make a connection between and dirty industry and the future.
So what you say is a quiet street life is no longer enough.
No, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Martin, is that also the reason behind the campaign where you sort of knit the welfare society together with the green transition, together with the sector? Is that also an attempt to attract youngsters to the sector?
I think we are challenged by the fact that we as an industry have been silent for so many years. And that's only now within the last few years that we've been more outspoken, and the creation of Olgas Denmark is a sign that we are now doing something about it. But we're coming in from quite a low, and we need to, I think there's a lot of stuff we need to establish. First and foremost, a compelling story. Why are we here? Why are we a part of the society? And we're certainly on that journey. We need to engage with social media more. We have kicked that off as well. I don't think there are any low-hanging fruits, because the tendency is everybody's talking about green transition, and everybody's worried about the pictures they see with, what is all the stuff that is happening with the climate change, etc. So we need as an industry to engage more with society and come up with some of the answers, and that is something we are working on.
But how important would you say a strong workforce is in order to attract investment, to attract companies working in Denmark? Is that of strong importance, or is the location of the oil in the North Sea the most important part, and then jobs may be taken by people coming from abroad?
I think a skilled workforce is a precondition for establishing yourselves in a country. And looking at what Total, for example, has said, that they are in Denmark, among other, because there's a very skilled workforce. So it does mean a lot. And they have also said that they will, they have centers for education around the globe, for example in Pau in France, and in Nicosia. And the one in Nicosia will be moved to Denmark for young engineers. So they are now, they're doing that, and they are going to run their business in Norway, Holland, and Denmark out of Denmark. And I think one of the reasons for that is the availability of a skilled workforce. So certainly it is very important.
So what would you point to for the sector? I mean, would there be room for moving into colleges, to schools, and trying to attract attention there?
Yeah, I really think there is. I think industry in general in Denmark has been reluctant to attract people from very young age. I think we have to move into public schools, tell them that there is also a career in skilled work. That could be in the oil industry, it could be in other industries. But what we can see is that fewer and fewer people are actually wanting to get into the skilled workforce. They're going to the gymnasiums, the high schools, they want to go to the universities, they want to be engineers. But the fact is that you can also be an engineer by starting being a skilled worker and then get some education afterwards.
But what's at stake here for you, for the Danish Metal Workers Union? Because you might just say, well, we just lean back. If there are no metal workers, price on skilled labor will just move up, and that's to the benefit of our members. So,
yes,
what's at stake for you?
Of course, we're in a capitalistic economy, and the price of the scarce resources will increase. But what we also know is that when the price on the scarce resources, meaning skilled workers, will increase, then of course the demand for skilled workers will decrease. So what we want is a strong, competitive oil and gas sector that can attract our members, paying them good wages, but keep on doing that without kind of reducing their competitiveness.
And that's in your interest because then, you keep it in Denmark.
Because we want to keep it in Denmark, we want to have a job feast, not necessarily a wage feast. So what we need is that we have education of skilled workers in order to kind of give the necessary supply to the oil and gas sector, so we can have increasing wages, but not too increasing wages.
Okay, so I'd like to take some questions from the floor, but just a final question for you, Thomas. When looking into the sector and the different really interesting engineering jobs we have there and opportunities to specialize, what would you point to your members? I mean, what are the strongholds of the sectors in approaching the young engineers?
One of the things that's very interesting at the moment for all kind of engineers, it is the digitalization, the artificial intelligence, and the automatization in all productions, and you have a lot of that also possibilities in the oil and gas sector. And if you can tell them that at the same moment that you can take this as step number one, then you have the possibility to go to another sector. And it's not because I think you had to leave the oil and gas sector, because the young people will also leave the other sectors. They are not staying at the same work for more than 5 years. So you can also attract people who have 5 years education from another job to your sector. And that's important to remember. But I think the first step is to get some of the new educated engineers.
Okay,
as first job.
And basically also emphasize flexibility.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So let's see if we have some questions from the audience. Yeah, Nicolo, I think there will be a microphone.
More than a question, this is, let's say, a comment from an external observer. I was very impressed by the debate because, for instance, in Italy, we have regular surveys among the graduated students. And E&I, for instance, was the top destination, the top ranking destination for newly graduated people. There is the perception of being part of an important national industry, of course, well remunerated, but also part of a sector which is at the edge, at the forefront in the technological domain, but also which has an impact on national security, on the development of the country. And I was quite impressive listening to you that this is not probably at all the case in Denmark, where, to a certain extent, I'm not downplaying the role of E&I in the Italian energy and foreign policy, but in Denmark, as far as I can understand, the energy sector is extremely important, ensures self-sufficiency to the country, and it is quite striking listening to your comments on this.
Okay, thank you very much. Any reflections on that? No? Well, thanks a lot. Any other questions? Yeah, there's one over here. All right, we'll take that one.
Yeah, I guess this is also more a reflection. I'm from Norway, and same as in Italy, Statoil is actually on the top company to work for as a young engineer. And here in Denmark, it's Novo Nordisk, but number 3 is actually Ramboll, and that's interesting. So I think just some reflections. It's I think it's great that you have a discussion on it, but maybe there should be a young engineer on the panel. And then also in this magazine, I haven't read it. It's probably great, but there's no pictures of young people, except for the ads. So I think you are making this harder than you have to. And if you look ahead, it's like the guys we have to educate today and employ tomorrow. They will go into totally different jobs. Yes, of course, it will be some shitty, some oil and all that. But at the end of the day, there will be less people offshore. There will be more people onshore. And I think there's a lot of attractive positions. So I think there are so many opportunities. But I think you are maybe cornering yourself a little bit, being banged by all the green stuff. And I think green is great, but there's a lot you can do. So I just have to say, keep working on it, but find some young people and put them on the panel. They could even wear skirts.
All right. Okay, thanks for that reflection. I think we'll just have some more comments. So, yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to speak from a young perspective. I think it's also an issue of that the sector, I think you also need to sort of let us see that you are contributing and enabling this green transition. Because from the outside and from a young perspective, it does sometimes, obviously the media does its part as well, but it does sometimes seems like the industry is actually trying to do its part to hinder this green transition as well. So I think we just also want to see that you are using this expertise that you have to actually contribute to the green transition instead of hindering it. And I think that's very important for young people who are not necessarily picking jobs or sectors based on high wages, but also on, purpose and other types of motivation.
Thanks. You just give your microphone to your neighbor, because I think that's. Yeah.
I definitely agree with the point coming from a young person. I would actually just like to know how exactly you imagine the scenario where you have young engineers coming to the oil and gas sector and then switching to the green sector. What kind of incentives do you give, for example, the other companies in the renewable energy sector to actually cooperate with you? Because you talked about cooperation a lot, but I can't really picture that, to be honest.
So maybe Martin, that's a question for you.
Well, first of all, I agree with you. We need to have more young people being made visible in the industry. In terms of collaboration with other industries, what we try to explain is that we should see the North Sea as one resource. We do have collaboration with other industries, and first and foremost, we try to reiterate that it's not a question of either or, but both and. So if you think that we're trying to hinder the green transition, then I don't know where you see that, but that's certainly not the case. And a lot of our members, a lot of the companies in our industry, they have a leg in both camps. And a lot of members they have activities with wind, for example, but also with oil and gas. So it's not in their interest to talk down the green transition. And again, if I may pull out Total as an example, they're the world's largest sun cell producer. So I think we all have a common goal, and that is to fulfill or fill up some of the gap that we've seen earlier today, that the world is screaming for energy, and we have an obligation to fill that gap. Mm-hmm. And in terms of the green transition, other energy sources, bring it on. We need it. So we are certainly not in the way of doing that. But it's a good point, and it's something we need to think about. If that is a perception that we're trying to hinder the green transition, then it's good input for us too. So how do we need to work with that, for example?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I think we'll save more questions for the next talk, because we'll keep on talking about this topic. But I think I'll say thank you very much, gentlemen, for sharing your somewhat critical views on the sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you.